Well, good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Fawzy Manaa, and I lead community engagement work for Muslim Association of Canada out of Mississauga. We've been doing, as you know, Muslim Association of Canada has been hosting a series of webinars over the past few weeks in light of the COVID-19 situation that we're all experiencing. And tonight we have a very special webinar with you as we're hosting the Honorable Ontario Minister of Finance, Mr. Rod Phillips, and then the Deputy Whip, Mr. Kaleed Rasheed, with us here tonight. We thank them both for making time for us this evening, and we thank you as well for joining us to both get informed and to ask some questions directly firsthand as well. As you all know, Muslim Association of Canada, is the largest Muslim organization in the country with 13 chapters from coast to coast. We have 8 full-time schools, 17 centers, and many part-time schools across the country as well, across 14 different cities. And MAC has been responding to this pandemic since the very beginning, taking measures, including putting many programs together to keep you in the know, to keep you informed. MAC has been supporting charities as well through some of the programming that we have been putting together, which I'm going to talk to you about in a bit more detail towards the end of the program tonight. But all in all, MAC is supported throughout, even before this pandemic, more than 87 local charities across the country, and in very different ways. And this also includes shelters. They include refugee settlement organizations that fight homelessness, organizations that provide food programs, mental health programs, and so on. The list goes on, and you can find kind of a listing of those programs and services on macnet.ca, and I'll talk about some of the specific, like I said, towards the end of the program. What we're going to do here tonight in terms of an agenda is, Mr. Rasheed, Deputy Whip Rasheed, and the Honorable Minister of Finance are going to start with some remarks. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions directly in the Q&A in the Zoom application. So if you have questions, start thinking about them now and maybe type some of them in, as we'll get the chance to hear from the Minister and the Deputy Whip directly answering your questions tonight. So without any further ado, I'm just going to very quick introductions. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, is with us tonight. Like I said, he's also the MPP for a member of Provincial Parliament in Ontario from Ajax, and Deputy Whip Mr. Kaleed Rasheed is the MPP from Mississauga East Cooksville. He's also the chair of the Standing Committee of the Legislative Assembly and a member of the Standing Committee on Estimates, like I said, the Deputy Government Whip as well. And we'll start with Deputy Whip Rasheed, who will provide a few remarks and introduce the Honorable Minister of Finance, and then we'll hear from the Minister of Finance and then go through your questions. Mr. Rasheed, over to you.
Jazakallah, and thank you, Fawzi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, assalamu alaikum, and a very good evening to you all. Thank you so much, Minister Rod Phillips, for joining this webinar. It truly means a lot to me, and I know Muslim Association Canada truly appreciate your time. First of all, I would like to start by saying thank you to Muslim Association of Canada for doing such a tremendous job during this time of crisis. The entire organization, whether it's in Ontario or across the country, has been very active by making sure that the people of this province and this country gets the support they all need. I know you guys have been actively working on food banks, but also providing daily meals to the people of this province. Roughly, I think about 200 plus meals per day that you have been providing to the people of this province. So thank you so much. It is truly like the Ontario spirit of what Premier Ford talks about. And I know this webinar is something where we are looking at Minister Rod Phillips for some updates. As you all know, Minister is working around the clock to make sure that we come out of this COVID-19 crisis stronger than ever before, and especially from the economic side. I know just last week when I called Minister at 11:30, actually I sent him a text message, and to my surprise, in 2 minutes he called me back, and we had a good chat about uh, how this province is going to come out from an economic perspective as strong as possible. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, who, along with our Premier, is doing an incredible job. And I am so proud of our team at Queen's Park as we are so united and working together with all levels of government, whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal. I think this shows that how united we are against this crisis. So Minister Rod Phillips, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kaleed, and Fawzy. Thanks for the invitation tonight. I do appreciate everything that that you are doing, Kaleed, in particular in your community and as part of our government. To everyone online tonight, assalamu alaikum. It's fabulous to get a chance to talk with you tonight. MAC is well known in our government, and I think well known across the country, and certainly in Ontario, for all the work that all of you do. And I understand you do this. This is not your full-time job. This is what you do for the most part as volunteers, as people who are trying to reach out and make a positive impact in our communities. And that is absolutely what's needed right now at this very difficult time. So I do want to leave most of the time for questions, and I'll stay on as long as I can tonight, as I am sort of, as Kaleed says, still at the office. So we are maybe I'll give you a little bit of a flavor for what we do during the day. But each day, Premier Ford leads us through our cabinet discussions. We have meetings almost every day, obviously dealing with the immediate issues that are facing the province, whether that's the focus on the health portion, or focusing, as he's asked me to lead, the initiatives around how we restart the economy. Last month, we launched our plan, about $17 billion worth of support for healthcare, first and foremost, but also support for people and for businesses. Important things like reducing electricity rates, $200 for every child under 12 for families to support them through what's happening now, the work that we did around trying to support our most vulnerable, and a lot of support relative to business, and have been working very closely with the federal government. For those who watch politics for the sport of watching the different politicians beat each other on the partisan side, this has been I guess a bit of a disappointing time, because there's been really an unprecedented amount of cooperation. I've been working very much with Bill Morneau around the supports that they're providing, making sure that they get done quickly and are sufficient to support businesses, and as well as with local governments to try to make sure, for instance, the deferral of property taxes that we enabled with a $1.8 billion support for municipalities. So there is a lot going on, but maybe I could give quite a speech, but I want to make sure that, because I'm a politician, that I spend more time listening and answering questions. I will say from my heart, though, that this is an interesting time when you think about what has been happening. For Christians, we just went through Easter. For the Jewish faith, through Passover, both times where we talk about sacrifice. When we're about to enter the holy month of Ramadan at the end of this month, I think around the 23rd or the 24th. I have a significant Muslim community in my riding of Ajax and in Durham, and that's a time I know when there's a focus on restraint and sacrifice and the lessons of the Holy Prophet around and COVID has in a way come, whatever one's faith, at a time where all of those lessons are being taught to us in a very direct way. We're having to think very differently about what we do, how we do it, taking care of our most vulnerable, restraint in our own lives, sacrifice in many cases for business people with their businesses, for families. And of course, we are being very well aware of some of the tragedies that can befall us in life as we see what's happening to some of our most vulnerable. So I think it's a time when all of us reflect on our faiths and see the strength that has given our predecessors and that it'll give our children going forward. Because make no mistake, for our generation, COVID-19 is that event. We are working our way through the health crisis today that underlies a very significant economic crisis, not just here, but around the world. We will be working very hard to make sure that we are, doing everything we can do to protect the health of our families, of our communities, but also to bring our businesses back up online so that people can do the work that they want to do once it's safe. I have to say, and Kaleed's aware of this, we regularly see the briefings. I know the Premier is committed and will be sharing some of the most recent information as early as tomorrow on the sorts of models that we use to plan, because I know that's the question everybody has: when will this be over? I can tell you that there is good progress and news as a result, as the Premier would be proud to hear me say, of the 14.5 million Ontarians who've listened to the medical professionals, who've listened to their government and done the right thing. So we're working very closely, and there is progress being made. But we also have to be aware there continues to be tragedy as well with what is happening in some of our long-term care homes, as it's been happening around the world because of the nature of this most insidious virus. So with that, Fawzy, I'll turn it back to you. I want to spend most of our time answering questions, but just let me thank the Muslim Association of Canada. Let me thank each and every one of you for the sacrifices you're making, for the restraint we're all having to show. Our communities will be better for it, and thank you again, Kaleed, for inviting me tonight.
Excellent. Thanks to you both, Minister Phillips and Mr. Rasheed, for those very good remarks. I really appreciate you being with us here tonight, like I said, and for making time to be with us here with the community to answer some of those questions directly that are on people's mind. The good news is there's lots of them coming in. so we'll try to accommodate obviously as many of those questions as we can. So please do keep those questions coming, but we will get started on those. So Minister Phillips, and you commented on this, on a few of those elements already, but can I get you to just talk about the overall emergency response plan of the Ontario government to deal with the coronavirus outbreak? And then we'll talk about some of the specifics a bit later as well in terms of financial subsidies and whatnot.
So the whole plan, and you will all appreciate this, because even in the very early days of March, we were still planning on releasing a budget and a plan in a very traditional way, but we had to shift gears very quickly. And at the end of March, really in about 15 days, we reshaped our plan, reshaped the fiscal trajectory with a different look at what the economy was going to look like. We're the only government in Canada who did that readjustment. And so what that means is we now have a $17 billion plan focused on supporting really health, people, and businesses. In the area of healthcare, we added $3 billion, actually $3.3 billion to the budget to support what you're seeing in terms of the reaction now, some of the additional facilities and beds being added, some of the additional support around public health, the COVID-19 test centers, a bunch of very important areas. And of course, we put a big contingency aside to support what might happen in the future. We also put $3.7 billion aside to support subsidies for our most vulnerable seniors, subsidies in electricity, so getting rid of time of use pricing, subsidies in a number of areas, other areas to support the most vulnerable. I mentioned some of those in my comments. And then $10 billion of deferrals, so significant deferrals of tax, particularly the employer health tax, significant deferrals of workers' compensation claims, and deferrals of property tax. So that was the plan. And that's really the first step. We are not so arrogant to think that, back in even the end of March, knowing what we knew, that we would know what would be necessary. But we've set aside those resources and other resources to support our communities. And again, I'll shout out working very closely with the federal government on their programs. They have put in programs to support businesses with loans. We've advocated very strongly for those. They've adjusted them even today, again, based on our advocacy, to bring the level a little lower for smaller businesses, supports for individual individuals. These are all things that we've been working together with on. But the essence of the plan from Ontario's point of view was that $17 billion to support our communities.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for that. If we were to talk about some of the financial subsidies in particular, if I can get you to provide a bit of an overview on the financial subsidies the government is rolling out to individuals and businesses in particular, and how can those subsidies be accessed by those individuals and businesses that are struggling through this period?
Sure, and I'm going to talk, if I can, because I want to be as helpful as I can about the federal and provincial subsidies, because I think they're both valuable. When it comes to the deferrals, to start with, we've also, with the federal government, deferred GST rebate, so people can continue to collect GST but not submit it until June. Right, again, trying to put cash into pockets. So you don't have to do anything to do that. You don't have to do anything on the property tax for businesses. You don't have to do anything on the workers' comp. Those claims for 6 months, where there won't be any fees charged, and similar for the education health tax. We've also cut the education health tax so that if you have a payroll of up to $1 million, you won't be paying any this year. That's about it. So those are things that are going to happen that businesses don't have to do anything for. Similarly, the elimination of the time of use pricing for an average business without doing anything, that's going to be about $300 a month. So again, we tried to do things that would just happen because we know that people are busy. Similarly, for the most vulnerable seniors, about 194,000 of those will receive a doubling of the payment we make to them without any action to take. For those of you who have children under 12 or special needs children under 21, you do need to go on the website, and Kaleed can make sure that we give you the various sites, but it's all accessible through Government of Ontario to get that $200 check per child, because you need to apply for that. From a federal government perspective, similar to the deferrals that they've done, there won't need to be any application. Those deferrals will last, all of them, till roughly September. Similar to ours, we coordinated that. They've also put in place loans that are available through the chartered banks and credit unions. So if you have a bank account, you don't have to have a lending relationship, but have a bank account or open a bank account at one of the banks, up to $40,000. If your payroll is at least $20,000, or it goes up to $1.5 million. And this $10,000 of that loan will be non-refundable, or will not have to be repaid. So it's a $40,000 in total. But again, this is meant to help on a cash flow basis. For people with the payrolls who are able to keep their businesses operating, the federal government is going to support up to 75% of that, up to $58,000 for payroll. So if you're in a business where you want to keep that payroll operating, that's a program the federal government is going to be rolling out. That material, that is going to be happening over the next 2 to 5 weeks. Also for individuals, people who've been already affected, there is a $2,000 per month emergency subsidy called the CERB, which will be available and can be applied for. And those applications are moving quite quickly. As well, they've eliminated the barriers for applications for unemployment insurance, but people should apply for the CERB first. And we've eliminated any wait times for OHIP. So typically there's a wait to apply for OHIP. Our government has eliminated that so that individuals can apply directly. Those are the things that are sort of top of mind ongoing, but there are a number of other things that are moving forward and coming out. And I would just say it's important to stay in touch and connected on this. One of those, the federal government, the Prime Minister today, after the urging of our Premier and the Premier of Quebec, has now talked about supporting rent for commercial rents. So that's a program that I know that the premiers and prime minister spoke about this evening. So there'll be, again, more information to come, but the idea is really just to help people get cash in their pockets, to cash in their businesses, to keep the economy functioning. And again, there are no doubt more programs that I talked about, but I think I've covered most of them.
Excellent. Thank you for the very elaborate description of many of those financial subsidies that are being rolled in, not just on the provincial side, but also on the federal side, and how people can take advantage of both of these sets. As you know, people are struggling through their expenses in this period, especially when many are being laid off, and a lot of people are kind of looking to figure out ways to save. And one of those things that are often top of mind for people is their auto insurance. And I know this morning you made an announcement around a financial hurdle that's being lifted to allow some of the auto insurers to provide rebates for drivers in the province. Can I get you to comment a little bit on what this really means for drivers in Ontario?
Thanks. It was actually just on that topic. Someone had texted me, so I was just texting one of the insurance folks. So
Nice.
about a week and a half ago, I asked the CEOs from the insurance companies to meet with me, and you know, it's a big industry. They have a business to run, and it's an important business. But it is something that for people, whether you have a fleet or you're just an individual, it's a big expense. And my message to them was that this is a time that everybody's going to remember how people treated each other individually and as companies. And I wanted to make sure that we give them every opportunity, because we do regulate that industry. We give them every opportunity to do things to support their customers. And they had said there were some rules in place in Ontario that, for instance, didn't allow rebates, so cash rebates, to be filed. So with the Premier's support this week and my team's support and Kaleed's support, we withdrew that regulation, and I announced that this morning, opening up the opportunity for insurance companies to do what I think needs to be done, which is support their customers. You know, as I've said to them, the customer you have today is going to be the customer you have tomorrow, and we're all going to remember how people are treated. So to allow them to do things like provide direct rebates, to provide reductions in insurance, and so I've been very clear with them that we've now gotten all of the hurdles out of the way that they asked for, and so far, and it's just their industry association, it's not the insurance companies, but they've responded quite positively. So I hope to see movement in a matter of days, not in a matter of weeks. I think this is a time when I talked about us all as communities, but as business people, I was a business person long before I was in politics, and it's what I'll go back to after. And you have to treat your customers right. And so I have expectations that they're going to be doing that. And I think customers need to let them know that to expect that as well, because you know, auto insurance is a very significant expense. We were in the process of reforming the insurance area as part of our program that we've committed to, but this is a special time when we should expect more from our corporate citizens. And so I will watch closely what they do.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister Phillips, for the answer on that. Maybe we can shift gears a little bit and give Minister Phillips a minute or two of break. Maybe I'll ask the deputy with a question here about the, you know, Mr. Rasheed, as an MPP, maybe, can you help comment on you know, kind of what your day-to-day has been looking like these days, and the important roles that MPPs have been playing day in and day out to support people, because, you know, people have many special circumstances, and a lot of people will be confused about eligibility, what applies to them, what doesn't apply to them, how can they take advantage of some of those programs that are being rolled out, and when can people, really generally speaking, reach out to you and your office for help and assistance when they don't know where else to go?
No, absolutely. And I will start by, first of all, thanking our frontline healthcare and emergency workers, because you know what, sometimes I'm like, the amazing work they are doing on the front line fighting this virus, this crisis. So a big shout out to all our frontline healthcare and emergency workers for doing such an incredible work during this time. Now, in regards to the people of this province, as MPPs, we are here to support you 100% during this crisis, which means that we are available almost like 24/7 around the clock, just like our honorable minister, our premier. They all are always on the phone speaking with constituents, stakeholders. For example, for myself, I have my team. We are basically, yes, we are not in our offices because we have to practice social distancing, but we are available through emails, phone calls, and you, the constituents or the people of this province can and should reach out to their MPPs for if they are struggling, how to apply, as Minister said, a support for families program. If seniors are struggling in, let's say, like getting groceries, then we as MPPs have some good volunteers who are able to go out there and deliver groceries. For students who are wondering about their OSAP, they can reach out to us. So honestly, I always look at this way: our day, sometimes I don't know when my day started and when it ended, because it's like around the clock you are answering phone calls. Like look at right now, it's 9 p.m. and we are part of this webinar because we want the people of this province to know that their government is standing shoulder to shoulder with them and making sure that we come out of this crisis strong.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Rasheed, for the answer. And again, a reminder to everybody, I guess, on that note, to really engage and reach out to their MPPs if they have questions on these programs that are being rolled out, or if they need any help and assistance, they'll find them to be very helpful, especially during this period. So Minister Phillips, to go back to you, a lot of people are thinking about the long-term impacts of the situation from a financial perspective, and really thinking about Ontario's financial kind of projection on the budget and long-term economic impacts for the province and for the taxpayers. And in a similar light as well, there's similar questions coming in here about, does that mean there will be cuts in the future? And I know we need to get through this period first and foremost, and then think about some of these aspects later. But people can't help but think long terms, and this comes to mind for a lot of people clearly through the questions that I'm seeing here.
They're great questions. The way I look at it, we were on track to balancing the budget. We had inherited a very large debt and deficit, and we're working our way towards it with a plan. But as you all know, one of the reasons you need to be good fiscal stewards in your family and your business is to deal with an emergency. And our emergency is COVID-19. So the work that we did and will continue to do in the future to put Ontario back on a sound financial footing is what's enabling us to initially make those $17 billion commitments and support healthcare as we have to. But there's no question that this is a setback. I mean, there are speculation about how bad this will be from an economic perspective, but we clearly are going to go through a phase. When you shut down most of the economy, you shut down, the revenue for people, you shut down the revenue for businesses, you shut down the taxes for government, you shut down the energy and the vibrance of the economy. Now keep in mind, and this is where my optimism comes from, that the year we just came from, last year, Ontario as a province, and Kaleed and I never take credit for this as government people because we come from business, but the people of Ontario created more jobs in Ontario last year than ever in the history of Ontario. 200,000 jobs. 74% of the jobs in Canada were created here in this province. So this province has the potential and the energy to explode literally in a positive way from an economic perspective. But we have to get to a safe place, right? With this virus, we have to understand how we are going to operate somewhat differently. Our manufacturing economy is very linked to the United States. So there's no point in the ball bearing factory in Woodstock opening up if it's selling ball bearings to the engine plant in Ohio if Ohio isn't open yet, right? Our retail environments need to, at least in the medium term, are going to have to consider what does it mean to operate in a social distancing environment. Once we can have the health workers tell us to get running it, how will we be able to do this and keep each other safe? Because what we don't want to do, having put all the work in, and there's much more to do on the health side, but then go back. Now, so all of this, your question is a good one, and your viewers here are right on. This is going to mean that we're going to have to pay for it at some point, and we're going to pay for it through needing, I hope, to have that vibrant economy that will start the virtuous circle we were in before. Premier Ford explains this much more simply than I do. Yes, create the right environment for business. You create the right environment for people. The businesses make more money. The people make more money. They pay more taxes. Not because we raise the taxes, but because they make more money. And then the government gets more revenue. And guess what? We can pay down the debt. We can invest in healthcare. We can do the things we need to do. That's the right way to run an economy. That's what we believe. But for now, we're going to spend the money that needs to be spent because this is about our kids and our parents and our grandparents.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister Phillips. There's a lot of questions coming in from people who are renting and people who are homeowners. And a lot of the renters are asking about, there's this one question in particular asking about the announcement that Prime Minister Trudeau made this morning about the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And as part of that announcement, he made reference to cooperating and working with the provinces on this program. So there's a question in particular with regards to how is Ontario contributing to this rent assistance program? And then, the reciprocal of that for homeowners. A lot of homeowners are kind of asking about, deferral of payments and deferral of interest, compound interest by their banks, and how they can take advantage of that.
Sure. So let me start with the homeowners. I mentioned that we enable most municipalities, if they choose to, and most of them have, to defer, which I know is not the same as getting rid of, but defer property taxes for homeowners and businesses. That is meant, again, to help in the short term. The banks working, and I have to give the federal finance minister the credit for this, although I certainly spoke to them as well, but the banks have entered into deferral arrangements around mortgages, and I think that is getting some momentum. Oh yeah, just a second. Do we have someone may have joined our call here. If I'm just checking. Oh, maybe not. Okay, we'll just give me a second, because a friend of mine asked if he wouldn't mind saying something, and a friend of Kaleed. So if he comes on in a moment, I might he can interrupt me. But anyway, so that mortgage relief is coming through the banks. It's taking some time, but coming through the banks. The Prime Minister did talk today about the program that I've been working on with Minister Morneau, and that the Premier led the charge on talking to the Prime Minister, was talking about commercial rents. And I have to say that commercial rent, the emergency rent program, is under discussion right now in terms of working through what would the details of that be, and for what period would that be. The discussion has been for a 3-month period. And how that would be executed, and very much focusing on smaller businesses, not on larger businesses. Just to put it in context, there are 1.2 million leases in Ontario. So that's how many people just in this province are in a commercial rental arrangement. So the idea behind that program very much is to focus on smaller businesses and the kinds that are facing the sort of pressures that Kaleed and I hear about all the time. So those are some of the areas of focus that we're working on. I think the loans program is one that I absolutely have heard from my own businesses in Ajax, people are taking advantage of. And I know as a business person, like, taking on more debt isn't your first instinct, and a lot of us have businesses that aren't oriented to that necessarily, but I think the way it's being rolled out by the banks and the credit unions, it's an effective way to get some bridge financing possibly. So those are the programs that are out there right now. We have, of course, for renters, for residential renters, made it so that there can be no evictions for the time being, so to protect those folks. But I think what I'd have to say is we are learning as we go. We're trying to make sure we put the supports in place that are necessary, and that we're protecting people through this initial period, while we also get a handle on the health crisis.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips, for the answer to both of those questions. I really appreciate it. Mr. Rasheed, if I can ask you a question around, look, I mean, our community is generous, and especially this time, it really brings out the best in us and the best of people. There's a number of people here asking about, their ability to help out, volunteer physically during this time. And a lot of people, are at home. Some people have a little bit more time, and they're able to really contribute some of that energy towards something that helps a broader community during the lockdown. Can you maybe help comment on what you've seen as maybe acceptable ways or good ways for people to engage and help out and be good citizens during this period?
No, absolutely. And I think Minister Phillips will agree when I say this, that the best thing the people of this province can do right now, and especially our community, is to stay home as much as possible. Because right now, our goal is, and Premier Ford, Minister Phillips, Minister Christine Elliott, they all are saying this every day, that you see there is a spike which is going up right now. We have to flatten that curve. The curve which is going on right now is going up. As soon as that we flatten that curve, inshallah, then we will see that this virus, how quickly we are going to defeat this virus. So yes, I mean, we encourage people to give, like, if you have organizations that are making some masks, please contact us. If you know somebody who is making hand sanitizers, like Minister Phillips and Minister Parmees Sarkaria and our Minister Vic Fideli announced the $50 million investment that if an organization who is currently manufacturing something and can now shift their tools to manufacture, let's say, like masks or hand sanitizers and some other things that can help us during this crisis, use this investment and be part of the Ontario spirit. We continue to ask people to help us, but first priority is the health and safety of the people of this province. So I cannot, in good conscience, encourage people to come out and do their part, but let's just all work together.
Kaleed, I hate to interrupt you, but it's our boss, the Premier. Do you mind if he says hello?
Oh yes, please go ahead.
How you doing, Queen? How you doing, Rod, and everyone listening tonight? Well, first of all, thank you so much for getting on the line with two great team members, Kaleed and Rod. You're both absolute champions. I just want to give a special thank you to our Muslim community that we have an incredible relationship with, and as our family has for many, many years. I understand. I think I caught the end of it about how can I help out. You know, we have the greatest province anywhere in the country. I say the world, greatest jurisdiction, and we've seen what everyone is made of. I call it the Ontario spirit, and the manufacturing might, and the engineering might, and the ingenuity that we've seen from the private sector, and the generosity from just the 14.5 million people that are going out there and volunteering and donating food and their time and their efforts. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of every single person in Ontario, proud of our team, and we're working collaboratively and coordinating with the federal government and the municipal government, and everyone's rowing in the same direction, and that's what's going to help us flatten the curve. I also want to thank everyone for listening to the protocols of our Chief Medical Officer about social distancing and self-isolating. That's what is going to help us flatten the curve. And the quicker we can flatten the curve and get clearance from the Chief Medical Officer, we're going to come back stronger than ever before. We'll have the economy moving and running on all cylinders. We have so much faith in the people of Ontario and the businesses. They're salt of the earth people, and they're hard-working people, but we have some of the brightest and smartest minds right here in Ontario, and we compete against anyone in the world as we were before this crisis. Our economy is absolutely booming because of the people, and we help with policies, but it's the people that drive the economy. So I just want to thank everyone for all their support. We're going to get through this. We'll get through it together, and then we'll be firing on all cylinders. So I'll pass it back to you, Rod. Thanks so much for having me on.
Hey, Premier. Thanks for calling in. Kaleed, thanks for getting this organized.
Thank you so much, Premier. I truly appreciate you joining. Means a lot to me and the Muslim Association Canada and all our participants right now. I can say it's one thing that I'm so proud of our Premier, who's doing such a fantastic job, out there every day, personally even picking up and delivering a mask shows that he is very committed to making sure that we this curve and we all come out of this crisis stronger than ever before. So Premier, thank you so much for joining.
Well, thanks everyone, and have stay safe, as they say, and stay healthy. And if there's anything we can help you with, by all means, call my office, call Kaleed's or Rod's office, and we'll get right back to you.
Thanks, Premier.
All the best.
Thanks, Premier.
Bye-bye.
Well, I gotta tell you, this is a very pleasant surprise. And for those who are asking, this was not planned. It's a
No,
very nice for the premier to drop in on the webinar. So
the truth is
great to
he
hear from him.
phones Khalid and I up until 11 or 12 o'clock at night to get work done. So he likes to make sure that we're working hard.
Very good, excellent.
I have to say that he's a man who, I mean, boy, you know, we all know hardworking people, but this is someone who is, you know, driven is the word, because he just understands the responsibility we all have. As we all are, we really appreciate his leadership. Anyways, time for more questions. I don't want to eat up all the time with us talking.
Excellent. So a lot of people are wondering in terms of planning, like, you know, Minister Phillips, like, God forbid, if we get a second wave of this thing, right? Like, in terms of how can we be in a better position to respond financially with as minimal a disruption as possible in the future. Like, we all know that this took a lot of businesses, a lot of people by surprise, the pace at which it was evolving, and we all had to react to it in real time as we had more data available to us. But what measures would the government be taking moving forward to ensure that moving, you know, in the future, we are not as disrupted by a situation like this one?
As I mentioned, the Premier has asked myself and a large group of our cabinet ministers, including Prabmeet and a number who will say what do we need to prepare to bring the economy back up. And so I'd say there are three main components of that, and extensive work is being done now. And we're going to invite comment, by the way, from a very broad group, because I think we need to truly understand things and we can make better decisions that way. But first and foremost, on the health side, we're going to need to make sure that we can do testing and tracking so that where there are outbreaks, we can support that outbreak, because there will be, our medical professionals tell us that this will not go away until we have a vaccine. So there may be immunity being built up in some people and some of us, but we need to be able to react more quickly than we could have a month and a half ago when there's a problem and an outbreak. And we saw in places like Taiwan and South Korea, the way that helped to control those issues. Secondly, I think as businesses and as people, we're going to have to adapt some of what we do. So in retail settings, what we're observing now with places like the LCBO, which are still open, is the difference is when we put the barriers between the serving people and we protect them, where we put masks on some of our maybe as individuals, the advice would be that we need to wear masks to protect other people. You know, maybe we should be saying for a certain size store, a certain number of people can be in there at a given time. You know, and adapt our behaviors so that we can, in manufacturing environments and construction environments, so adapt our behaviors for the time being to reflect protection from that. The third, and this is very important, is we know now, as we've learned sadly around the world, about the very dangerous nature of COVID-19, particularly to the elderly and to other vulnerable populations. So we've talked about putting an iron ring around, and I think that's the right visual, an iron ring around our seniors' homes, around our vulnerable individuals. So that even as we develop an ability to adapt in the economy and work at things to protect those individuals in ways that we wouldn't have understood a month and a half ago or a month ago, but we now understand, so that we can have the economy start to work its way back. Because we have these different ways of working, because we have better support from a health perspective, but because we're protecting our most vulnerable. I think those are the three steps, but we're literally just starting that work. We announced the committee that I'm chairing last week. The work's already begun, and we're going to be reaching out through Kaleed and through all of my caucus colleagues into communities to understand what needs to be done to study best practices in some places around the world that have been through this already, so that we can learn as we go, because the world is going to be different for the foreseeable future, and we have to understand that. But I'm confident we can figure it out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips, for this answer. So a lot of people are also kind of inquiring about, well, for the current situation that we're in, and according to our best predictive models that are available to us at this point, what the plan is, and like if you can provide some sort of timeline for opening things up a bit more, and when business can maybe not go back to normal, but to open up a little bit more, accepting customers, some of the non-essential businesses specifically. I think I heard that this morning or this afternoon in Alberta, there was an announcement made about sort of like a multi-point plan about kind of through which they might be able to ease things up a little bit with some conditions. Are there similar plans being considered in our province here in Ontario? And what sort of can you tell business owners who are sort of want to plan ahead for the next few weeks and months?
Yeah, so that is what do they call it, the $1 million question about when. And the answer to that right now, I have to be honest, is we don't know. So I can't say by this date or that date. I can say, and Kaleed said this, and the Premier said this, and I always say this, right now what we're doing is bringing that date closer. So people social distancing, people washing their hands, these seem like simple things, although they're inconvenient, but they're simple. These are the things that are making a difference. So we must keep doing that. However, what we do know is that by looking at those sort of areas I talked about and looking at how we do business differently, how we behave differently, we will be able to look constructively at when and how and in what ways we can bring things forward. You mentioned modeling. One of the things that our Premier committed to, he was the first person to talk about this, and all the other governments followed him, was to share that kind of modeling that you just talked about with people. And literally, I don't want to make news in your call, but very, very soon, stay tuned tomorrow, right? Because one of the things that we were looking at now is the latest round of that, and that starts to give people a sense of timing. And he's mandated that as soon as he sees that information and we can understand it, he will share that with the public, and will continue to do that and be doing that in the very, very near future. And then I think it's going to be about looking at what regions or areas it is possible in a province like Ontario, where some parts of the province, because of what they've been through or because they've been managed to contain it, will be open sooner than later. It'll be what types of businesses. My various cabinet colleagues reflect different areas of the economy, and I'm asking each of them to look at their area and say, how can we A, do business differently, and B, how can we open that business? What is the timing for that business? So I'll give you an example. If the three of us owned the Toronto Blue Jays, right? The idea of putting 50,000 people into the stands anytime soon, that doesn't seem highly likely. But is there a possibility that some sports might be able to happen without fans there, so that some other businesses that rely on people being able to watch that business might be able to partake? If we owned a travel agency, I think there's many reasons why that might be difficult. Because borders are closed and places are closed and these things. But if a restaurant used to be able to have 50 people sit in it, maybe in the future it could only have 10. But it could have the takeout business and it could have the 10 as a starting point. So this is the work that we have to do. We want to give certainty to people as soon as we can. We don't have certainty right now, but we are going to have a plan, and I think that plan will start to let people know how they can make their decisions. And in the meantime, we already talked about it, but the government, our government, and the federal government are trying to provide the support so that businesses can see their way through this period.
Excellent. Thanks for that elaborate answer, Mr. Phillips.
I'll tell you a little bit. Kaleed knows that, so I'm a little bit chatty. So.
Excellent. No, I think those details are really helpful. Yeah, the person asked the question, I'm sure will appreciate the elaborate details here. So thanks for that. There's a question here about, and I know the Premier talked about this a lot, like the situation that happened with with goods being stopped at the border from the US to Canada, to Ontario specifically. Like we know that trade between the United States and Ontario, is really big, and we all know and been hearing about the approach of the US government to trade in general. Is there a plan for for long term, for what's the plan for the province to diversify trade and ensure that we pivot towards maybe a global trade policy and an approach, so we avoid situations like this in the future?
Yeah, so just two answers. In terms of the current, what I was in touch with U.S. State Department, their Consul General yesterday. We've been in touch with the various governors, again, around restarting that cross-border trade and making sure we're understanding what's going on in some of those communities. Obviously, that can only happen once it's safe to do so, but we need to make those plans. But there is so much opportunity. I don't want to use the numbers because my colleague, our colleague Vic Fideli, uses the numbers, but I'm going to try because I think I remember the number, and if I'm wrong, I'm only wrong a bit. He talks about how with the United States we do $400 billion worth of trade a year, and of course that is very good. We have a wonderful location next to the biggest market in the world. But with India, which Vic Fideli visited, and Kaleed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he said it was $40 million of trade from Canada, and if it wasn't, it was only a little bit more. This is the biggest democracy in the world, right? There's a whole other set of markets where we have relationships in India, in Pakistan, in Indonesia, across large swaths of the world where we have opportunities. Now, the really interesting question we're all going to be asking, and I think this is something as business people we would need to ask, but also as politicians, is what has changed as a result of this situation about our ability to have confidence in relying for vital things like, let's say, N95 masks and respirators on international supply chains. So I do think there's going to be a reconsideration globally for some things that maybe weren't considered vital before. But when the President of the United States, for a time period, said, no, you can't have these, and when people are having trouble getting access, for instance, a lot of the pharmaceutical based products come from India, right? And as we look now at some of the challenges potentially even for Canadian pharmaceutical makers to create the drugs that people rely on, I think that there's going to be a rethink internationally and certainly locally. We are going to have to understand that, and I think that's going to create great opportunity for us here in Ontario, because we are a manufacturing heartland and because we have such ingenuity. So I think there is an opportunity to open up greater trade ties. The United States will remain important to us, but I think all of us need to think about, with some things like drugs and medical supplies and key medical equipment, can we afford to be fully reliant on a global supply chain anymore? And well, I'll tell you what the Premier said. He said he's never again going to let it happen that people's lives are at risk here because we can't get a part from another place in the world for a vital piece of machinery.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thanks for that answer. Mr. Rasheed, do you want to say something, to provide some closing remarks?
Yes.
So I think
we have somebody who just joined and would like to say a few words to both Minister Rod Phillips and Premier. So our surprise guest, please. I think that surprise guest just joined us. There you go.
I'm happy to be the surprise guest.
Buddy, Walied, how are you doing?
How you doing, Rod? You're still at the office.
I am. I've known this man since he was 16 years old. And
that's a fact.
And quite disturbing to me is he doesn't look that much older today, at least compared to me. So.
Well, look, Rod, I was asked to come on here on behalf of the Muslim Association of Canada, which is a great organization, and I'm glad that you're getting to know them, to thank you very much for joining them. This is the largest and most important Muslim organization in Canada. I know you've got a very important set of constituency, a large constituency that's of the Muslim faith. So I know this means a lot to the folks, and was also asked to thank Kaleed Rasheed for bringing you to the community. So thank you very much, Kaleed, and Ahmed Atiyah and the entire leadership of MAC. I was really, really, really happy to hear that you were doing this, Rod. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to brag about Walied a little bit because earlier today I had a call with him. He's taken on, I mean, everybody knows he's very successful, important business person, but he's taken on a very important role. And we were talking earlier in this group, Walied, about what we need to do to make the economy run in the future. And so Walied is chairing a blue chip committee that is looking at the entire securities and capital markets in Ontario, which which in many ways drives the Canadian capital markets. And he's put together a fabulous group of people who are going to be giving myself and Kaleed and the Premier advice around what we need to do exactly what we've been talking about, which is set Ontario and Canada up for success. So Walied, you know, and literally we were just talking about this. He was giving me the briefing on the progress they're making. Despite everything that's going on, despite running one of the biggest law firms in the country, he still finds time to do it. So,
well, thank you, Rod. And I was just told by Kaleed that the Premier also joined tonight, and what an incredible job he's been doing.
This is wait for the next, everybody will be signing on to the next one to see who signs on. This is good.
Exactly.
Kaleed, you did well.
Thank you. And thanks to you and the Premier.
Thanks.
Thank you, Walied. Truly appreciate. Minister, your closing remarks.
You know, listen, let me just say thank you to everyone. Thank you for the work you do in our communities. Thank you for being such fabulous ambassadors of the Muslim community. You know, Kaleed plays that role within our caucus in terms of connecting all of us, but all of you play that very important role in terms of connecting into the community at large. And so thank you for that, and good luck. I always say, whenever I get to talk to, I know there are many people who are business people. You know, my background is as a owner and of a number of businesses. You know, I never forget that the government just puts in place the opportunity, if you will, the environment. But people who put their money at risk and their mortgage, their house, and their families at risk to run businesses, those are the people who make Ontario great. And that is what we got elected to do, which is try to make sure we create an environment, and now we're having to do it through this very difficult challenge together, but create an environment where this province can truly be the greatest place in the world to raise a family, to start a business. And so thank you all very much, and thank you very much to the leadership of MAC for the invitation today. I hope I'll get another invitation back. I can probably get Walied to come back because I know he knows it. The Premier is just, if he doesn't phone me, but I can't guarantee I'll bring him back next time. But I'd love the opportunity to see you all again.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Minister Phillips. I'd like to thank you and the Premier for your leadership, and same to you, Mr. Rasheed, as well. And I'd like to also thank you for really making the time to be with us here tonight, including the very pleasant surprise appearance by the Premier as well. In closing, I'd like to just mention a few remarks about some of the other stuff that Muslim Association of Canada has been showing. So like I said at the beginning, MAC has been taking the initiative to run a number of programs during this time to provide alternate programming online for community members of all sorts, and that includes these webinars that we're putting for the community, educational programs, online resources like Mac Connect Hub that you can access on macnet.ca, some additional initiatives and programs that MAC is running during this period, as well as a MAC Give Blood Drive and a MAC Give Food Drive as well, to help those who are vulnerable. And this is running across the country, by the way. 9 cities and 9 chapters of MAC are participating in this nationwide, which is absolutely fantastic. So whatever you can do, for those of you especially that asked earlier about how you can help, these are incredible opportunities for you to be able to help, and those that really need this help during this period right now. A few quick notes. So we all know that Ramadan is coming, and we all know that this Ramadan is going to be a very unique one for our community. And Mr. Rasheed, I think you're trying to say something. You're on mute.
Sorry to cut you off. I know Minister, he has another meeting at 9:30. So if we can allow Minister to leave the webinar.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister Phillips. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Rasheed, for letting me know. So as you all know, Ramadan is coming up next Friday. MAC has made an announcement. It's on macnet.ca. But we also know that this Ramadan is going to be very different for our mosques and Islamic institutions as well, who are, many of these institutions are relying on us, our donations, our help and support during this period. And none of us will be able to go to the mosque for Taraweeh or any of the regular prayers during this period. So this is a call to the community to do whatever they can to go out and help the online, help the mosques, their local masjid and your local school and your local Islamic institution or your local charity that's struggling right now, that needs that help in order for them to be able to continue providing the services that they do to those who need that support during this time. For all those details and more, all the programs that I've mentioned and ways that you can stay connected and engaged and keep supporting your community, please do go to the website macna.ca and see any of our social media channels as well, where you'll be able to get all this information. Again, in closing, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for attending with us today, and I hope you really enjoyed and benefited out of this webinar. And one more call out to all our guests here tonight. For being with us, Walied, Mr. Rasheed, Mr. Phillips, and the Premier. It was incredible to have you all on the call, and we'll look forward to having you on again in the near future. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening.